If you are going to prosecute a United States president,
yes,
you have to come with clean hands.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
We are all human. We all have relationships and we date people in our profession and whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But when you are trying to prosecute somebody like Donald Trump, your shit has to be tight.
Welcome back to This Week in White Supremacy. My name is Jasiri X. I'm co-founder and CEO of One Hood Media. That seemed like that ended too soon, but anyway, I'm running the Roadcaster. We have a special episode. You know what I'm saying? I'm holding it down for the This Week in White Supremacy crew that's all over the place. You know what I'm saying? Although Treble's in the building with us, shout out to my man. You know, he still don't like supremacy. He's here. But we are doing a special one-on-one conversation. We brought a lawyer in from a New York City lawyer. Right? Is that bad to say, or is that? But that's who you are.
Yeah.
Safa Robinson is here. She is a native New Yorker. She is a trial lawyer, but you're also a political commentator, or a legal commentator.
Yes.
On law and crime. And she was thankful enough to at the very last minute, although we were kicking at the Roots picnic this weekend, and that was dope.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Come and talk to us about the myriad of criminal issues and legal issues that are happening in our nation. It seems like they're all happening this week.
At the same time.
At the same time. So we're appreciative. Did you just want to say a little bit about yourself and your background, or do you want to just get into it?
I'll share a little bit about myself.
Please do.
I'm a criminal defense attorney. I practice in New York State Court. I also practice in federal court. I've been doing that for quite some time. I used to be a former prosecutor. So, you know, that's the gist of who I am.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna need you to just, if you lean into the mic, or like if you want to move the mic closer to you, because I know you're not that soft-spoken. If you're a New York lawyer, no, you're not that soft-spoken. But obviously the major news, and there's probably a reason why Miracle is not here. Miracle, for a matter of years, sat in her traditional seat on this show and said that Donald Trump will never be found guilty of a crime. And it just so happened the week that he was found guilty of a crime, she's not here. So I don't know if that's just, you know, it is what it is. She's out doing work representing One Hood, but Donald Trump was finally, at least in my opinion, finally found guilty. I'm an abolitionist, except for Trump and January 6ers. I want them to get the maximum jail time, right?
Yeah.
So Trump was found guilty of all 34 felony charges. And so I guess legally, like when you saw, you know, this is your backyard, right? New York, DA Alvin Bragg. A lot of people said he had like the weakest case. But I mean, he went 34 for 34. Like he went out like Jordan. I mean, he was making every shot.
Yeah.
What was your initial reaction to, like, well, I guess when he was charged, did you think he had a chance? Did you envision him going 34?
No, you know, when he was initially charged, first of all, it didn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's Donald Trump. I mean,
yeah.
He was a criminal.
It didn't surprise me. It also didn't surprise me that the case made its way to trial. Donald Trump is definitely has a narcissistic personality at his finest.
Yes.
So that definitely didn't surprise me there. However, falsifying business records charges are not the easiest charges to prove. And in fact, these types of charges are not often used. They're kind of like a backdrop, or it could be a catch-all for certain special circumstances.
Right.
Again, they're charges that do exist. They are charges that you could be convicted for, but they're not often used and they don't often go to trial. So the fact that this case ultimately went to trial was pretty surprising, but on Donald Trump's side, not as surprising, because I would expect him to go to trial on anything because he doesn't know how to accept responsibility.
Yes.
So he was found guilty of 34 counts of the falsifying business records. There's a lot that goes into trial. So when it comes to picking the jury, what judge you have,
Yeah.
you know, all of those things factor into whether or not, you know, you're ultimately going to get a conviction.
Yeah.
A lot of us attorneys, and there's a saying that your case is won by the jury that you pick.
Yes.
Won or lost by the jury that you pick. So you've got a Manhattan jury that sat 12 jurors, deliberated for some time. I think it might have been a couple of days.
Like a day and a half.
Yeah, a day and a half. And I think that's a pretty quick verdict,
Yeah.
you know, for a case that has this many charges.
Yes.
They've had to go through each and every charge specifically, or every act.
And they was like, guilty, 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 guilty. And they were even saying like they did Trump's team asked for like the individual.
To poll the jury. So,
Right, to poll the jury.
Most of us attorneys, when we get a guilty verdict, we want the jury polled because we want to make sure that there's not one juror that's holding out or that has been convinced, you know, so thoroughly convinced or manipulated by the rest of the jurors to come back with a guilty verdict. So we will often have the jury polled if there's a guilty verdict. That's not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting that you say that because one of the Republican talking points where they were saying they wanted to get some Trump-loving Republican on the juror and just refused to convict him. Like this was like one of the things that they were openly talking about, what they call jury nullification, which was fascinating to see from like this. These are law and order people, obviously law and order until it comes to a rich white man that looks like them. And then, you know, this is how America is. Those go out the window. Rolling Stones did an article where Trump, I guess, felt like he had a juror, someone that, according to Rolling Stones, he called my juror. It just, to me, it sounds like my nigga to me. I know it's not, but he was like, he hoped his juror would save him. And they were saying when he was found guilty of all the cases that he was shocked because they said during this whole conversation, he was like, my juror, my juror. There were some reports that they said one of the jurors only got their news from Truth Social. I don't know if that was disproved or not, but even all the jurors basically said not all of them were guilty of everything. That's significant. And you're saying the amount of time they deliberated was significant.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, when it comes to jury and juror deliberations, you know, they're going to take the time. They have to go through each and every single count of the indictment.
Yes.
And make a determination as whether the facts that they heard at trial and the evidence they heard would sustain a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. So the my juror kind of gives like John Gotti trial vibes.
100%, yeah.
But I will say, you know, from a defense perspective, when we're picking the jury, you know, we look at everything. So we're looking at how is the person responding to me? Are they smiling at me? Are they frowning? What kind of books they have in their hand? And so I'm sure that they are, you know, they have individuals that I think actually with Trump's team, they hired an independent jury consulting firm on the case to help pick their jurors. I mean, he was fucked from the beginning.
Yes.
But they hired an independent jury consultant.
He's probably not going to pay him. I mean, he don't pay nobody else. I mean, he has a bunch of outstanding debts, so, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, so, you know, each juror has to go and, you know, ultimately decide for themselves. And I'm sure he was hoping that one of them was going to hang, you know, the charges or hang trial. And so ultimately it didn't end up.
That didn't happen. Now, one of the narratives of this was that, like, all Trump did was just pay off a porn star that he had an affair with. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, in a lot of the conversation when he was found guilty was the big deal. Like, all he did was pay off some porn star he had an affair with. Like, but I guess from how do you go from that's all that he did to 34 felonies? Obviously, it's more complicated than that. Can you give us what happened that rose it to the point of you got 34 felonies and could possibly be facing jail time?
Absolutely. So what ultimately happened was, and the biggest issue here that I think Democrats were ultimately going at is he tried to undermine the integrity of the election.
Yes.
And that's ultimately what it comes down to, you know, and I hate to say, like, nobody cares if you paid off a porn star, you know, things happen.
Yes.
However, when you undermine the election of the United States and the presidency of the United States, that becomes a bigger issue than just your personal business that you try to keep out of the public when you're running for president.
Yes. No, that's real. So do you, again, you're in New York. Is he going to jail?
He definitely could go to jail. He faces up to 4 years on each count.
Oh, shit.
However, do I truthfully think that he's going to end up in jail? I do not. There's a lot of sentencing options the judge would have.
But is he going to have like the ankle bracelet on the joint?
You know, in my mind, I'm like, once you're convicted, I mean, why didn't they take him into custody? But
you know what? I didn't think about that.
The judge
they didn't
had
put like
the authority.
The cuffs on him and should have walked his ass in the back.
The judge had the authority to take him into custody at that point. The judge did not. So I think his sentencing date is July 11th.
Yes.
Yep. And so what I think could happen is one of a few things, actually. I think he's going to be heavily fined.
Yes.
Also, the sentencing guidelines and sentencing options are up to 4 years in prison, New York State prison. Also probation, which he'd be serving 5 years probation, which would actually hinder, his ability to freely be president.
Yeah.
You got to check in with probation. You got to ask for permission to leave the county. You got a urine screen, drug screen, mental health, all of those sorts of things, which somebody who's going to be the leader of the free world, quote unquote, is going to be pretty difficult for them to have to get through. Yeah.
One of the things that people were saying is that there are several countries that deny entry to felons. Mm-hmm. Canada being one of them.
I was going to say Canada being one of them.
They said the United Kingdom is one of them. Egypt, Brazil, so that he would have to have special circumstances if he's elected president. Okay, so here's the article. Trump can't travel to these 38 countries now that he's a convicted felon. China's one of them. Israel's one of them. So it is fascinating to see this. The question came up, can Trump vote for himself?
Ultimately, when an individual goes to prison, while they're incarcerated, they lose their right to vote.
Yes.
So if he's incarcerated, he will not be able to vote. If he's not incarcerated, then he will be able to vote. So, of course, he's going to vote for himself.
Oh, but it is fascinating to see, because that was one of the things that came up is that, he's able to run for president, but you have so many people that cannot vote once they get a felony, and that this should encourage people to allow somebody that went and served their time. If you got a certain amount of time, you went and served your time and got out, why not allow them to participate in the political process? It'll be interesting to see if some of these Republicans do that. Now, according to when we first heard about this specific conviction, we were told, at least this was the narrative, that Alvin Bragg had the weakest case. Do you believe that? Like he had the weak, because if he has the weakest case and he's 34 for 34.
Yeah, it couldn't have been that weak. I know that Stormy Daniels herself testified at the trial. What people don't realize is that testimony is evidence.
Yes.
It just depends on the weight that the jury is going to give that testimony. And she testified to certain facts with respect to the allegations that ultimately sustained the conviction. I'm sure that they've got the business records, which aren't hard to move into evidence at all.
Yes.
And they're what we call, as lawyers call, self-authenticating. And so, the proof is there.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get a 34 count conviction? Absolutely. But if you've got the proof and it's clear as day, and Trump doesn't help himself, you know, I think he had a bunch of contempt charges, or contempt.
Right. Yeah. They had to they had to threaten him with jail time if he kept violating the gag order. Then he had to bring in some of these other sycophant senators and people that just worship him. And
jurors are looking at that. What people fail to realize is that jurors are looking at every single person in the courtroom.
Yes.
They see things, they hear things, they inquire about things, even though they're not supposed to talk about it. I mean, they're human. Right. And so looking at Trump doing all of these asinine things is not helping him at all. It's pissing the jury off. Sleeping?
I mean, I would be mad if I was a juror and I had to listen to all of this, and then I look over and you're asleep. But I have to be awake if I'm asleep. So it's super fascinating. Now, would you consider Trump a political prisoner?
Absolutely not.
He's our Mandela, Safa.
Absolutely not. No.
He referred to himself as that.
The reality is he's being treated like any lower class American or any regular American. And some people don't like to be treated that way. They think that they're above the law and whatever the case may be.
Correct. Now, according to Trump, and I just want to get your reaction to this. Says Trump on his potential for prison. Trump said, I'm okay with it, but I'm not sure the public would stand it. So remember, Trump famously said in the debate, talking about like the Proud Boys and these white supremacists to kind of stand back and stand by. We watched the January 6th individuals wreak havoc on the nation's capital. So now should New York, like how do we, I mean, I don't know. I be feeling like I be feeling like he should be charged for this. I feel like, I mean, isn't that a charge, like inciting violence? Isn't that a charge?
Yeah, that is actually a charge for inciting violence. See, Trump likes to toe the line between, explicitly saying certain things and implicitly implying them. And right here, he's implicitly implying, I've got fans. Yes. I've got people that support me. I would even go as far as saying, you saw what happened on January 6th.
Yes.
Listen, they're not going to stand for that because these people support me. I know after he was convicted, I think he's received donations up into the $1 billion range.
Yeah. Which
goes to show that he does have a lot of community support.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people that are willing to back him up. And with the craziness that you see now, who knows, what people are willing to do.
What did you think of a lot was made about the New York rally that he had in the Bronx? Obviously, like his followers were like inflating these numbers and making it seem like it was like 30,000 people, and it looked to be like maybe like 300 or 400. But the rappers that came, it was like 2 New York rappers. I think one dude's name was Shep. I didn't know these guys, Sleepy Hollow or something, but ironically, like they also had felony charges.
Well, and here's the thing, and this is what I was saying to somebody recently is, you always have to be careful. Like, again, you want to play chess and not checkers.
Yes.
My concern and view is that the Democratic regime, if that's what you want to call it,
yes,
wants Trump so bad that you are essentially pushing him into the arms of voters,
right,
who really do feel like, what do we have to lose? The Biden administration hasn't done much of anything.
Yes.
We're still in debt, still student loan debt.
Yeah.
We've got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We've
Absolutely.
got all of these things going on. Gas prices are high. Grocery prices are astronomical. And what do I have to lose? Trump gave us money, quote unquote, when he was president before.
Absolutely.
Now he's a convicted felon, so that's my nigga. Like, now we can relate. And so now I personally think they pushed him right into the arms of voters to be able to say, yeah, I can give him a chance now.
It's interesting because, like, to me, they waited too long. And I think if they had done it right after, Biden got into office, if they would have went after Trump that early, now because it looks politically motivated.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're in the midst of an election. So even if it's not, like you said, Trump's a criminal. There was some sportscaster that did a piece. It was like some sports commentator where he was like, everybody around him has felonies. His, Michael Cohen is a felon. His former campaign director, lawyer, all of these people that are around him. He was like, basically like Trump. He was like, if this was just some regular guy, and you saw like him and all his friends were felons, you would assume that they're like running a criminal racket. And so Trump obviously is doing that, but because it is close to an election and because Biden is such a bad candidate, he's not a great speaker. He's not, an imposing presence. You could argue his policies or whatever, not arguing that, but I'm just saying as like a package, a candidate is like a package to sell. He's an old rotten piece.
I was going to say, he's very tired.
An old rotten piece of meat. I don't know. It's just hard to sell. So I think you're right in that aspect. Now, of course, his followers in the wake of this, you had people call for the execution of the judge.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, I'm sure Alvin Bragg is getting death threats. Somebody put on Twitter, time to start capping some lefties. This can't be fixed with voting. Again, I think like it's weird to me. I watched the point where when the Black Lives Matter movement was beginning to come to power, and there was the term, what was the term that they used to talk about like a domestic it was like this term where it was like, oh, you're this domestic. It wasn't terrorist. I had to find this, but it was like specifically like for Black activists. You know what I'm saying? This terminology to like criminalize us.
Oh yeah.
And I watched people because of, we've seen people get their social media taken away, all this, but at the same time, we're watching, to me, like these white people say violent things, do violent things. They're on Truth Social saying God knows what. And it seems to not be a will to like actually, even when it comes to like January 6th, I feel like them sentences are short.
Yeah.
Y'all was attacking cops. And I feel like those sentences are real short. So like, is it that, again, there's no will to do this, or why? I mean, I look back and say like, why aren't these people being arrested?
Yeah. I think that, with respect to, the threats and things like that, Trump supporters have lost all sense of reason, or at least the people that do this. I can't speak for all of them.
Yes.
But they've lost all sense of reason.
Speak for all of them. They're all terrible.
And so, in terms of, finding these individuals, charging them, it's a very wide net. And we look at things like judicial economy, not wanting to waste judicial resources and things like that. And it's not that I agree with it.
Oh, I know you don't.
But, we have, there's so many people.
Because when we shoplift, that's never the case. Where it's like, oh, he just shoplifted something small. It's never the case. Here, you had somebody, here's a quote. Somebody said, a million armed men need to go to Washington and hang everyone. That's the only solution. Like, that person should be put in jail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if, I know
it's making a terroristic threat.
I know we come from a community that doesn't believe in snitching again. I'm telling on all y'all. Like, what if I knew his Twitter handle?
No, seriously. And so I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday. We were talking about child sex crimes, but this is very similar in the sense that being able to locate individuals on the internet through Facebook or Meta and forwarding these things to law enforcement agencies that are able to respond to the threat. I mean, look at what happened, unfortunately, in Tops massacre in Buffalo, New York, when there were things being put out online on Twitter that should have been flagged and sought prior to him going to that location.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how long before it was, but then it's too late. So at what point are we going to take mental health and physical gun violence serious in this country, especially with something like this? And Trump does nothing but fan the flames.
Right.
And other people don't do anything but sit on their hands and cry after, something unfortunate has happened.
Now this child sex crime, this didn't involve like a rap group. Somebody that had a weird case.
No, but
why is he around?
Oh, damn. I actually thought you were talking about Diddy.
No. Talking about, them weird case people and why are they around? So from the weakest case, which supposedly was the New York case where Alvin Bragg won, to what is considered the strongest case, which is the case that Fani Willis has, and Fani Willis having this record of being, she has some really high conviction record. She just won re-election. Now it's saying that it's an appeal hearing, and that appeal hearing is set for October. So there's a likelihood now that Fani Willis will be trying a sitting president for criminal crimes. How do we comprehend that?
I have so many thoughts about this.
Please share.
So that is definitely true, and that's definitely a possibility. I think that, accountability is a big thing, and it's time that, Trump be held accountable in a lot of ways. And a lot of these politicians, because he's at the forefront right now because of the time we're living in, but we've got a whole bunch of other individuals that are on the same wave that we just don't see directly in the limelight right now.
Absolutely.
So, that's definitely a possibility that she would be trying a sitting president. I think it's going to be a circus, if that ultimately were to happen. And we know he's more than likely going to go to trial because he's not going to, accept responsibility on a RICO.
And he already had there already has been these guilty pleas, and those people that pleaded guilty have basically saying that in their guilty plea, they're going to testify or help in this case.
Sounds like another case down there, State of Georgia versus YSL Young. Which I will say, you know, in terms of Fani Willis, she seems like a wonderful person, but we have to be careful of the lines that we draw in terms of using free speech against defendants.
Yes.
And the circus that's going on in that trial, I can only imagine what it's going to look like when Trump goes to trial down there.
Absolutely. Now, do you believe, you know, the issue was made of Fani and the guy that she was having a relationship with? Did you believe that was just smoke and mirrors, or was that something that Fani should have known better?
She should have known better. She should have known better. I personally believe and professionally believe if you are going to prosecute a United States president,
yes,
you have to come with clean hands.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
We are all human. We all have relationships and we date people in our profession and whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But when you are trying to prosecute somebody like Donald Trump, your shit has to be tight.
It's got to be tight. Now, the last Trump, you know, I guess, bit of information was that in Trump's own words, Trump, in his own words in 2016, Trump doesn't believe Trump should be president. Remember, 2016 was his whole lock her up for Hillary. Mm-hmm. It's funny because he just came out and said he never said lock her up. And then I forget what news channel it was. They just showed like a bunch of clips of him saying, lock her up, she should go to jail, da 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 da. But the case that he made in 2016 was that if Hillary was elected president, she would be on trial, and that trial would compromise her national security and would not allow her to do the job as president. Now, here's Donald Trump, who, if he wins, is going I guess
he's
from
essentially going to be in the same position that he talks out of both sides of his mouth.
But how compromised from a legal perspective? Like, how compromised would he be? We already listed a bunch of countries that he can't go to because he's a convicted felon. But how compromised would he be that he's, he would literally get inaugurated and then he might even be on trial during that time.
Yeah, and the presidency is a very important position. You've always got to be, in office, traveling, foreign affairs, and particularly in the area of foreign affairs.
Right.
How are you going to accomplish the goals that a president should be accomplishing when you can't even leave the country,
right.
You can't even leave the county that you live in, you might be incarcerated, and you're going to be sitting on trial? How much attention can you give to that presidential duty when you're sitting in the middle of a trial fighting for your freedom?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how much he gives attention to the things anyway. But I mean, part of me believes that America deserves an incarcerated president. I mean, it's just, what would be more American than a president behind bars? I don't know if he would get a different type of uniform. Like, is he in red, white, and blue instead of orange? I don't know. But that would be fascinating to watch. And again, part of me is like, this season of America, that would be wild to watch. But on the other hand, I mean, I don't know what that would mean to like the democratic process. Again, it's going to be wild. It's
going to be wild. It's definitely going to be a hindrance. And so, do I think that's going to stop him from wanting to be president? No. Do I think that's going to prevent him from being president and people voting for him? No. It's going to be crazy as to what ultimately comes of it.
Well, ultimately, I guess the last hope, because it looks like the judge in the classified documents case has come under scrutiny for kind of like kicking the can down the road. Her name's Amy something. Let me see. Judge Trump classified doc case. I'm Googling on the fly. Eileen Cannon. She rejected the gag order. Supposedly, she was somebody that was appointed by Trump. But again, I kind of put this on Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice. They decided to try this case in Florida. And this is what you got. You got a judge that he appointed who seems to be slowing the case down. So that happens after the presidency because it's a federal case. Trump could basically pardon himself. Is that correct to understand?
That is correct to understand. And it, again, wouldn't surprise me if that were to ultimately be what we see in the future. And so, you got to be mindful of prosecutions, or prosecutors have to be mindful of their prosecutions. What jurisdiction are we prosecuting in? Who are the judges? Are they Republican? Are they Democrat, conservative? What are their views? Because those views are going to come into how they handle and decide these cases. So it's definitely something that, could ultimately rear its ugly head later.
Yeah, well, I guess our last hope. It's funny because there was a picture of the appeal judges for the New York. I don't know if you saw this. They were like, because, Trump is going to appeal this New York case, and the appeal judges are all black women. And so, of course, Republicans are saying, oh, these are the appeal judges in New York. That's not fair. And so, somebody did an amazing TikTok video where they were like, oh, now you know what systemic racism looks like, right? You don't believe that that's going to be fair because none of these judges are Trump's race or gender. So now you don't think that's going to be fair. That's what we as black people have to deal with all the time. So that'll be fascinating. But I guess, the final hope for us is, Judge Tanya Chutkan, who has the January 6th insurrection case, because if Trump is found guilty of an insurrection, that would disqualify him for running for president. So could there be a scenario where in the 11th hour, Trump is found guilty of insurrection, not allowed to run, and then all hell breaks loose?
Yeah, but I think the issue is going to become the timing of it. So if Trump goes into office, whoever his vice president is going to be, I don't think we know that, or maybe we do, but I don't know that.
He hasn't announced it yet.
If he goes into office, then ultimately it would turn to the vice president, who would be the one in charge. If not, if it's prior, then we've got other issues to deal with there as far as who's going to be president.
Yeah, we don't have a timeline as far as what when this case is going to come before the court at this point, and would this possibly happen before the election? I don't know.
Yeah, the appellate divisions, and I think they're in the first department. The appellate divisions, they sit on terms. So whenever that term is for that case to be heard will determine ultimately when that answer will come. And I also want to say, so with respect to the appellate divisions, they're New York courts. So it's not really going to affect, or should not really affect, whatever happens federally or on the other cases. This is just a court of higher jurisdiction in the state of New York that ultimately, will hear certain cases.
Yeah, it said the trial was scheduled to be underway March 4th, but it was postponed. And so I don't know if right now we have an actual date on that. But again, I think, and I don't know who, I guess they're saying possibly the governor of South Dakota, like she killed a dog. Supposedly Trump liked the fact that she killed a dog. I kind of deep down, I want it to be Gums. I think, what I'm saying? Tim Scott, we call him Gums.
Who's that?
So just because he's just such a sycophant, we'll see what happens. But, the Trump trial is not the only high profile. It's so funny. It's not to be outside. It's almost like Biden is like the Mr. Magoo of if there's a way for him to trip and fall or mess up, because as soon as a Trump trial ends, and this is the wildest part, is because the Trump trial actually overshadowed the fact that information came out that supposedly Trump called a contestant on The Apprentice a nigger. That one of the executive producers, his 20-year NDA ended, and basically came out and said, he called the guy Kwame Jackson. He was like, will America accept a nigger apprentice champion? That didn't even get any real headlines because of the Trump trial. But there's another trial, and that is the trial of Hunter Biden.
Yes.
Hunter was out. Hunter was living life. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if folks are because I feel like if you're relating to Trump, you might relate to Hunter. I relate a little bit more to Hunter.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that I was smoking crack.
Yeah, but
so Hunter Biden has a federal gun case. So what's happening in this case?
yeah, so I think the trial started Monday or yesterday.
Okay.
I think they've seated a jury. I think the prosecution has began opening statements as well as their direct case against him. I've checked in with the updates periodically, and I think as of recently, they may have started moving things into evidence or proof into evidence. One of the things at issue at this trial is going to be the application that he made for his pistol that he ultimately purchased. And a part of the issue becomes, did he lie?
Yes.
Did he lie to obtain that pistol permit or that pistol application form? It's an ATF form. It's a federal form. You sign under penalty of perjury.
Okay, gotcha.
And one of the things is that you can't be, quote unquote, addicted to drugs.
Yes.
And as we know, he's got a history of drug abuse.
I mean, they got all his videos.
Yeah, a history of
in 4K.
Abuse.
We've seen him smoke crack and seeming like have a lot of fun in 4K. Yes.
And so what the U.S. attorney is going to do is make the connection between his drug use at that time, which I think would have been in 2016.
Yes.
And buying that firearm and ultimately drafting that application, lying under the influence of drugs, or you weren't addicted to drugs, and ultimately many of us know that he probably
is he looking at is Hunter Biden going to go to jail? Is he looking at like serious time?
Definitely go to jail. He's looking at, I believe, 25 years in federal prison.
Wait, so you're telling me if I go to buy a gun and they say, "Are you addicted to?" I mean, I drink a lot of coffee. I don't know. And you say no, but you are. You're going to get 20. You can get 25 years.
Yeah, he's charged with. I think they're going to trial. I know he's got at least three charges that he's facing in this trial. I believe.
Right.
For the firearm and things like that, as well as the application being an issue. And so he ultimately, can look at 25 years in prison for that. Does that mean it'll happen? No. Will it probably happen? Probably not. There's under the federal law, we have sentencing guidelines. We can upwardly depart, downwardly depart. It's a lot different than in state court where you just have, falsifying business records carries a sentence of up to 4 years. Whereas in federal court, there's a scale that looks at each person individually.
Right.
You get assigned a category, an offense level, and it kind of comes down to, where you fall on that chart as far as what you would be sentenced to.
So we've seen, with Donald Trump, we talked about his guilty verdict actually led to this outpouring of fundraising, support, obviously like lunatic and crazy tweets, and hopefully doesn't lead to violence. Do you see something similar on Biden's side? Like if Hunter Biden is found guilty, will this make Biden, more relatable? We had talked earlier about Biden. It was like Biden was like, this is what families go through. I love my son. He's an addict. He's struggling. I'm going to be there for him. So is this beneficial to Biden, or is this play into the idea that like Trump has the Trump criminal family, that Biden also has a criminal family?
I think it could cut both ways in terms of Biden's administration. I think a lot of people are going to relate to having someone in your family that has an addiction.
Yes.
And that's very real for most Americans. And so I think that he's going to be able to gain some sympathy from that, possibly.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I think there's been so many issues with this administration and the lack of action and doing things and waiting to the last minute that some people are tired and they're like, that makes us know, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I'm on some of the political listservs. I know people were feeling like even that in the wake of Trump being found guilty, that the Democratic messaging wasn't strong enough, that it didn't, I guess Biden came out today and called Trump a convicted felon, which again, we don't know if that's going to be helpful to Trump or not.
Yeah, here's the thing. Biden has to tread lightly because your son could possibly be a convicted felon.
True.
And many people that you want the vote for or from are convicted felons. So what are you really saying here? You know, you got to be careful with that.
I mean, he's saying like this guy I'm running against is not. I mean, I think that's where a lot of our issue with Biden's campaign is that's what it seems to be, the messaging, not this is what I've done.
Right.
And this is how I've benefited, you know, your community, our community as a whole. I know he just launched like the black voter thing. And, you know, he came out and said like it was black people that put him in office, and he's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, where are the results? The policy initiatives that really have benefited and helped the black community? Because the farther away we get from Trump's presidency, like you said, people can look at it differently, right? Mm-hmm. You forget that like 2020, we were in the midst of a pandemic and all hell was breaking loose, and this dude was telling us to go get some bleach, right? The farther away from that, you start to be like, oh, remember when we all got the checks and we got this money? Mm-hmm. So it is kind of fascinating to watch, but it does seem like, I don't know, part of me doesn't want him to tread lightly. I'm gonna be honest, because I think like Trump has changed the dynamics when it comes to how to engage.
Oh yeah.
If Biden had been found guilty of anything, Trump would be calling him a felon, a no good. He always called him Crooked Joe. Yeah. Now that you're the felon, I would flip it around. Like Crooked Trump, he's a convicted felon. This dude got all 34. Like I feel like Biden actually, you know, needs to talk more shit. Personally, because Trump changed the dynamics. If you try to have a political conversation with him, you lose. Because he's coming out with the insults. This debate is going to be fucking insane.
Oh, yeah.
To watch. It's going to be must-see TV. Now, there's some other legal news specifically around black people, right? Because there was a fund called the Fearless Fund. And this was a fund started for black women. And the idea was for them to grant black women business owners so they could help, you know, capital financing, right? A lot of times we might have great business ideas, but we don't have the capital funding to actually produce the business, to hire people, to do all of the things that will make our business successful. Here comes the Fearless Fund. Here comes these black women that started to grant other black women business owners access to capital grants that could help spur their business. This conservative named Edward Blum, who was the same one that basically ended affirmative action in college admissions. It didn't end legacy in college admissions, where, you know, if you're the son of Donald Trump or the son of a George Bush, you get into Yale even though you're dumb, right? It didn't end that, right? But it ended, you know, black people and other people getting different treatment. Now a federal appeals court suspended their program, basically saying that it's discriminatory. Where do we go as like a community from here? Because what they're saying is that more than likely, like this guy won against affirmative action at colleges, mind you, these are universities where we're like 4% already.
Right.
The same thing is going to happen when it comes to programs like this that are specifically designed to help black and brown folks. How do you see it?
You know, it's very unfortunate. You know, this has gotten a lot of attention, and there's a lot of litigation, and there's going to continue to be litigation on this case and on these sorts of topics.
Yes.
You know, the sad part about it is we have been disenfranchised as a people for so long. And these laws, and for example, the Civil Rights Act was set in place to help against discrimination, or to prevent us from being discriminated against. And we already know that we already start further behind than our typical white male American counterpart.
Me and you know that, but there's a lot of white people that don't see that, right?
Absolutely. And how is crazy to me. But basically what he's trying to do is flip the script on us, you know, and say, hey, well, the way that you want to provide these benefits to black women, well, I don't get a benefit because I'm a white male. It's like, you know, playing victim.
100%.
Essentially what he's doing.
Yes.
And so what the issue here is going to be is you cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, ethnicity with regard to contracts.
Right.
And so that's the theory he's going under, basically saying, hey, I'm a white man. I'm not afforded the possibility of receiving this application because I'm a white man, and they're discriminating against me because of that.
It's crazy.
And so there's a lot of issues that are going to come up, and I think that we're going to continue to see lawsuits coming across the country on this. I know that one issue, and I think some lawsuits were dismissed on the basis of standing, which is something that basically says, do you have the ability to even file a suit here? Is this relevant to you? And how it's relevant when a person, he's never going to apply for that position.
Of course.
So how do you have any standing here on an application or for something that you're not even going to ever use, truthfully speaking?
Right.
But now you want to say, oh, it's racist, it's discriminating against me. Get rid of it.
Is there, and so this is the Fearless Fund CEO and founder, Adrienne Simone, said the ruling was devastating. She said the message these judges sent today, and it was a 2-1 ruling. She said the message these judges sent today is that diversity in corporate America, education, or anywhere else should not exist. These judges bought what a small group of white men were selling. It says in the ruling, it says that in the court's majority opinion, it says the fact remains, though, that Fearless simply and flatly refuses to entertain applications from business owners who aren't black females. The court's majority opinion said, adding, every act of race discrimination would be deemed expressive conduct under the Fearless Fund's argument. And again, is that them just reading the law flatly without any particular context?
And that definitely could be the case. And one of the things, as you were talking, I was thinking about is, you know, the law is the law, quote unquote, and judges are bound by the law. And the way the law is written, it was never even written for us or for our benefit.
Right.
And so when they read the plain language of these statutes and these laws, they have to apply it. Technically, it makes sense why they came to that decision. Now, is it effed up? Yeah.
But I mean, don't they have leeway though to read it and interpret it in a different way?
So it depends. You know, I haven't read the statute in some time, but there has to be basically a strict review of it. And so, you know, there's strict scrutiny. There's certain tests that the courts look at in determining whether or not this type of act or activity is appropriate.
Yeah.
And when you deal with race, it's a heightened level that the court will look at. And technically, again, I don't fucking agree with it. Is somebody being quote unquote discriminated or being turned away because of their color of their skin? There's an argument that yes, they are.
So in the dissenting judge, it said, likened the plaintiff claims of harm to soccer players trying to win by flopping on the field and faking an injury. Said none of the plaintiffs demonstrated that they had any real intention to apply for the grants, and what she called a cookie cutter declaration that were threadbare and devoid of substance. And that's exactly what you said, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You're not planning, you don't need a grant.
You don't need a grant. You don't want a grant. You had no interest in obtaining. You didn't even know what this fund was until you probably saw it on TV or saw about it in the news.
Yeah.
You had no idea. You got however many millions and billions of dollars to sit around and file these lawsuits everywhere.
Right.
You don't need that. You had no intention on doing that. You're trying to do that basically to prove a point and to play with the law and to essentially excommunicate individuals, you know, in these programs on the basis of race.
It really seems like that, you know, where you're like, you see like a couple of successful black people and like angers you.
Oh yeah.
It's that really like Make America Great Again, which is like Make America White Again. Like, let's go back to a time where these white men could sexually assault and abuse whatever woman they wanted to. They could just disrespect and violate any black or brown people that they wanted to in whatever way and get away with it. It says, according to the Fearless Fund, it says less than 1% of venture capital funding goes to businesses owned by black and Hispanic women. And so now, like, here's less than 1% happening, and it's like you want to shut that down. Similarly to like the college enrollment of black people already dropping because of the price of college. And it's like that, no, that's still too much. The few black people, because you see some black people with degrees, you know what I'm saying?
You know, it's the want to play victim at the end of the day. You want to play the victim. You can't stand to see black people elevating and continuing to be and occupying these spaces that really are for you. So for example, like lawyers, only 5% of lawyers are black. The majority are white males. You can't stand to see our population is going to grow, and you want to do any and everything that you can to prevent that from happening, because what does that mean for you then? What does that mean for your power and the things that you have the ability to do when you have other races such as black people now coming in to have a checks and balances with you, because we're not going to let you do certain things,
right.
you know? So
yeah, I mean, you know, I guess it's Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis. It's like all these black people getting into these positions and like starting to try to hold these white men accountable, and they don't want to be held accountable. Like, it was all good when it was just black people and brown people going to jail.
It was
like
good.
It was all for that. And some poor white folks, it was all good.
Yeah.
The minute we start saying, okay, these white men, these powerful, rich white men need to be held accountable, now all of a sudden you want to start cutting back on all these things.
Yeah.
So we have one more case, and this is super wild to me. There's a group of black men that are suing American Airlines, claiming racial discrimination. So these black men were basically ordered off of an American Airlines plane in January, according to what they said. Okay, so they were just told to leave the plane. One of the dudes gets off the plane and he notices everybody being told to leave the plane are black men like him, which would be wild. So, you know, he started recording like what's going on. It says a flight attendant had complained about a passenger's body odor. And I guess when they said, hey, yo, which passenger?
Listen.
One of these niggas, I don't know which one. They all look alike. I don't know which one of these niggas it is. Let's just take them all off the plane. And so they were all removed from the plane. And they said American offered to rebook them. But when it became clear, after about an hour, there were no other available flights in New York, they were allowed to reboard the plane, right? And so, like, the one brother talked about, like, going back on the plane. You know, like, we fly a lot. We travel a lot.
Yeah.
So you want to get on that plane and you want to leave and go to your destination. So they pull somebody off the plane. You're thinking that person did something wrong. They're the reason you're being held up. Now you're going to put them back on the plane.
You were going to stick them on another plane anyway, whoever it was. So
was you going to get them?
That makes sense.
Was you going to give them some deodorant or some perfume? I don't even understand. So they have an attorney who said if American Airlines received a complaint about a black male passenger with offensive body odor but could not verify the complaint, the solution should not have been to eject 8 separate black men from the plane. I guess legally, do they have a claim?
You know, it looks like they may. You know, this isn't my area of expertise, but they're certainly filing suit. They have filed suit. I know that there's been some issues with American Airlines and discrimination.
True.
You know, so I think that there's going to be a good leg to stand on with respect to that.
Yes, it says in 2017, NAACP warned black travelers about flying on American. And so this is bringing that. Yeah, I guess, I mean, so like, just touching on this, right? Because I think, like, as black people, we do experience micro and major aggressions.
Oh, yeah.
I just had a situation at Roots Picnic with a white security guard, which I thought was weird because we're at a black picnic founded by black artists with black people, majority black people in attendance. And this white dude kind of, I felt like was overstepping his bounds. Like, at what point do you feel like we should get like a lawyer involved? Like, is there a particular threshold?
Oh, no. Get a lawyer involved immediately, because time is of the essence when these things happen.
Yes.
There's certain time frames you have, whether it's 30 days or 90 days. You want to remember, you know, the allegations or what happened to you as quickly from the event as possible.
Yes.
Because you're going to want your lawyer to get it down in writing, you know, or do depositions, whatever the case may be. You do not want to wait and sit on this. And you also want to make sure that you send a message to these airline companies that are already having issues, you know.
True.
Significant issues, that this isn't acceptable behavior. It could have been anybody. You pull 8 black men off of a plane. It could have easily been a white person, a Hispanic, Asian, whoever. So where did this ultimately come from?
Right.
You know, who was it? The flight attendant herself that said, hey, this person. And again, if you had to pull 8 people off the plane, you clearly didn't have enough information to even know that this was in fact true or the case. Because if it was, then you would have walked past the person, smelled them and said, sir, can you come with me? Or addressed it appropriately.
If it was that offensive,
right?
Like, smell me as I'm walking by. Like, and then if you smell me and I smell good or suitable, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, sir, you can sit back down. Oh, it was just a mistake. But to basically say, and I mean, I don't see what else can be more discriminatory than basically say, hey, there's a black person that has a body odor. And if you say which one, and the solution is just take all the black people off the plane, because you're not going to do that for a white person.
No.
Because then you would only have 8 black people on the plane, right?
Yeah.
And so like that idea that's your solution, and there's video where they're actually talking to a black worker at American, where they ask her, is why we were pulled out the plane because we're black? And she says yes. So at that point, like you said, if you have it documented, we always encourage people to film the police.
Oh yeah.
If you're ever and I almost put this white boy on the butt, shout out to the black woman who allowed me to go where I was going. There also was a point where I asked him what his name was, and he kind of backed up. I was like, what is your name?
Oh yeah.
Who are you? And he kind of backed up, but it was.
Yeah, it's the accountability thing. Again, it's that, I want to puff my chest. This is how important I am.
Yes.
Who are you to tell me how to do my job?
Absolutely.
Or who are you to tell me that you get to just sit on this plane and, have a free for all and offend, quote unquote, everybody else. So there's a lot of issues here, when it comes to how black people are treated and how white people are addressing it and how these big companies are addressing it,
Yes. Last question, because you had actually sent us our Karen of the week. Has been any update on the district attorney? She was like the DA in like upstate New York, right?
Yes, she's actually my DA.
Oh shit!
I worked under her administration
for
a number of years.
And tell me her name again.
Sandra Dorley.
Yes. Yeah. So Sandra was the one that basically
said, "Get the fuck out my house."
Yes. Did all types of traffic laws and would not listen to wouldn't stop for the police. Went home, walked back and forth into her house, had her hands all in her pocket, and then has there been any, because I know there were people saying that she should be removed, that like the cases that were brought before her should be voided. Has there been any update on that?
So her position is she's not going anywhere.
That's what she told that cop.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me. One thing I will say is she's a very strong-minded woman, for better or for worse.
Yes.
And so there have been a number of investigations that have been launched with respect to her behavior that day and whether or not she will be disciplined in any way. So there hasn't been a decision on any of those cases.
Right.
However, there's still the public outcry. They're still protesting.
Yes.
And it's just another situation where we're again seeing how individuals in power can, abuse that power to some extent. And I think the situation could have played out differently if she would have just pulled over. The cop would have probably said, "Oh, hey, I know. Okay, go ahead. Whatever." A lot of us have gotten out of traffic tickets.
Absolutely.
But it's different when, the behavior that she displayed on body camera footage was done, because had it been any one of us, we would have been arrested.
Yeah.
This would have been another, God bless her, Sandra Bland situation.
Could have been.
Or
absolutely.
Anybody else. So
we definitely wouldn't have been allowed to like walk back and forth. Now, did the police make a statement on that? Because it's always also interesting that like she obviously was very disrespectful to this police officer. Did they have anything to say about it?
They had nothing to say, from at least the last that I heard, that they were not going to comment on the ongoing investigation. I know the Attorney General's office is investigating, doing their part in the investigation. And in New York, they typically investigate police conduct or illegal and unlawful police conduct. So I know that they're investigating the Webster Police Department to some extent.
One other question. Did they, because I know the governor of New York, and what's her name? Hochul or something?
Kathy Hochul.
Yes. She made a comment on it, but did she ever introduce computers to the Bronx? Or did she ever tell black people how a computer?
Look, she's another one. She's another one. It's like everybody's trying to tell black people how they should feel or what they should or shouldn't be offended by.
But that's crazy.
Yeah.
Black people in the Bronx don't know about computers?
Like, huh?
That is insane. But whoever the brother that made the little meme where he was running around, it led for a lot of comedy. But again, it's also like these are people in power.
Yeah.
And this is how they see us and view us. And this is supposed to be somebody that's a democratic, liberal person. And you see us as some third world.
Yeah.
You know, the Bronx is big. The Bronx has beautiful areas as well. Like, what are we talking about? So, yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on our show.
Thank you.
This is Safa Robinson, and you're on Law and Crime Network as well. If you want to see more of her, we do have a white pages for this week. Our white pages is called Of Greed and Glory, in pursuit of freedom for all except Donald Trump. Like, that's the only, we want him to stay in jail. Freedom of all except Trump and January 6th. But this is Deborah Plant is the author. It says, if you want to understand the current issues surrounding race, social justice, and inequity, you have to read Deborah Plant's book, Of Greed and Glory. So it's a book that you can pick up. That is our white pages. We have some stuff happening this weekend. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, mainly we're going to be in Harrisburg. We're going to be riding to Harrisburg to do a rally around making sure public education is invested in, making sure that our democracy is invested in, that we can vote for who we want to vote for in November. And so if you're interested in that information, you can go to One Hood Power. We got our Artist Liberation event coming up with the Pittsburgh Pirates. That'll be June 18th. That's also on our social media if you want tickets to see the Pirates, and also these amazing visual artists that we will have at the park that day. You know, go to One Hood Media and get that information. With that being said, do you have any last words?
No, just thank you for having me on the show. I enjoyed myself.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for being with us. And hopefully next week we'll see what Miracle has to say about Donald Trump being found guilty. But until then, peace. One Hood, y'all.